Hey, so this is the Bike Skins channel, and as you may know, we've been getting into a little bit of manufacturing here and there. I've had some previous CNCs, but a local Tormach 770 CNC mill with full enclosure became available, and I decided to go ahead and purchase it. The seller was very friendly and helpful with getting it loaded up. He had a motorcycle lift, so it didn't take too long. So when I got back home, though, it was a little bit different story. So here it is, me rotating it, just using a come-along winch to kind of rotate it to be oriented the correct way. And I used a floor jack to kind of help take some of the pressure off the feet that I was pulling towards. So the back legs are kind of acting as a pivot point. Another thing I did was I decided to add these sled runners. So these are 2x12s, and I just cut a little chamfer in the front. I moved to a large lathe one time that had legs on it, and I did it this way. Kind of having these sled runners helps with pulling it across the trailer, because if you just had these feet here, of course, those would dig into the wood and it just wouldn't do right. So if you jack those up, cut those, slide them under there. Another thing too is the sled runners kind of extend out, and that kind of helps with whenever you're sliding down the gate, it doesn't topple over. So here it is, me getting in position again. You can also see that the windows were removed for travel, and then we also um, used some bungee cords to hold open the door so those didn't flop around when I was transporting this. And this is a local deal as well. I think it was like 15 minutes from my house. If I was picking up one in another state or something like that, I would think there would be way more extensive things you'd want to do. You'd probably want to maybe even cover it, have, high wind tape kind of holding the doors over, or maybe even remove the doors. So, yeah, so here's that stage of me positioning the sled runners. Now, some of these pictures are kind of out of order here. So this is after I fixed the sled runners to the feet, and I'm just using like a really large 3x4 piece of steel tubing to kind of leverage it towards the back of the trailer. So here's a shot that shows how I anchored the feet to the board. Now, it seems a little low tech right here. It's basically just a doubled up steel strap, and I have 3 screws on each end. And there's not really a lot of weight that's being supported here. It just kind of helps the machine from tipping over. So I figured this would be sufficient. Obviously, if you have um, thicker steel strap, or you have other methods, you could definitely make this be a little bit more secure if you wanted to. But I figured this would kind of work, and I would be able to watch it and see if it felt like it was pulling those out. And so it did work. Another thing too is you can see I oiled the trailer here a little bit, just kind of over the high spots. So it kind of helped it glide over when I was pushing it off the trailer. So here it is in position again. So basically what I did was lifted the front and then just kind of pushed from the back. So here's another angle too. You can see once I kind of got it from the back using this large um, 2x4 of steel tubing, and just kind of leveraged it using the posts here to leverage it. I was able to kind of get it towards the back of the trailer. And I believe also at this point I actually let some air out of the tires. And so once you let the air out of the tires, that kind of decreases the angle of this tailgate, which is essentially what you want to do. Another thing I'd recommend too, if you look at the spindle, it's kind of up maybe a foot off the table. Um, the seller kind of had it set up before I arrived, but I think what would be best would be lower that spindle as low as you can before you transport it. Now, I guess I could have hooked up power to it and the computer and everything and lowered it a little bit more before transporting or trying to unload it, but I just kind of left it where it was at. I figured it wasn't too major of a deal since I had the sled runners attached to the bottom. So there's the tire, air pressure let out again. Here's a good view. You can see the air pressure really makes that, probably drops that tailgate down a good 2 or 3 inches, which greatly decreased the angle here. And so if the angle was higher, then the weight that's top heavy here would have more chance of feeling like it wanted to tip over. Another thing too that I did was, when you got multiple floor jacks, you can kind of jack up different areas and put some rebar under the sled runners. And this is an expanded metal grate right here, so it doesn't roll quite as good as like oiled steel. So if you have some dowels or rebar under there, it kind of helps roll a little bit better. And I think that's how the Egyptians built the pyramids. So there's some more rebar looking pretty good. Actually going down the gate, so you can see it's headed down towards my driveway right there on the right. So here it is. Once the mill was pretty much just barely on the edge of the ramp of the gate, it became way harder to push because the angle was just so low. So the next thing I did was I just lowered the other side where all of the weight was on this end of the sled runners, and then I just pulled the truck away, and of course it just came off of that tailgate there. So before I did that, I also positioned a few of those rebars under there so it would have something to kind of help it roll on. This is also another good view here. You can see the platform for the monitor and everything is kind of anchored in so it doesn't flop around where you're doing all this moving. So once I kind of got it down, I just found something in my shop. So I've got a lathe over here with a metal desk, and then I don't know if this anvil and the drill stand helped, but there's a lot of weight over here, and it actually never did move at all. I think it's Grizzly 10 by 20, 22 lathe or something like that. Definitely heavy enough to where it was able to pull these on some rebar. So once I kind of got it in the shop, I started kind of rotating it around. You just pick whatever side you want it to come around on, and then jack up on the other end, and it'll basically let it kind of pivot. So it started pivoting around. So then finally I kind of got it all the way in the shop, and you can see it's very cluttered in here. I've got a lot of stuff packed in the shop. I'm going to be eliminating a lot of things from here. On this CNC plasma table, I've got a router that I was using that'll probably get sold. I got a 3-in-1 brake shear roller over here on this side. It's probably going to be moved over to this side. That way, because this plasma table's on wheels, I could just easily pull it out of the way, because the way it is now, it's going to be facing the mill and everything. Oh, and also I kind of thought this out too. A lot of people have mills like in the back of the shop. I've got mine near the door, and that's because where the reservoir is for the chip collection and the coolant is in the back. And so you need to be able to access all that, and you need walking room back there. And so if that back end is facing the garage door, you actually have an area where you can easily access that. And if you needed to troubleshoot it or mess with the cables back there or anything like that. So this is a 2-car garage, so my left hand side of the garage is totally clear pretty much. So there's lots of walk around room for entering and exiting the garage. So yeah, that pretty much covers it. Wanted to kind of give a little bit of an overview. I've seen other videos on unloading heavy things, and they're just extremely long. And I just kind of wanted to give somebody this idea, because obviously if you go buy a used mill, you're going to have to figure out ways to move it around. And you want to do that without disassembling it, of course, because you'd have to take the enclosure off, and then you'd have to use the bar that lifts it up with a hoist, and you'd have to break it off into 3 or 4 pieces and move everything individually, and that just takes too long. So yeah, I just thought I'd make this video. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to subscribe as well, because I'll probably be doing a little bit more shop oriented videos, more so than just bike skins videos. Thanks.